Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for the Business and Sports panel. I'm Jim Gray, Sportscaster. We've got a great panel here today, and I'd like to thank the Milken Institute for having us all here and the great work that Mike Milken does. He's an incredible man, and we're all pleased to be in his presence and to be at this great global conference. Seated on my very far right is a man I'm sure many of you have come to know very, very well here in Los Angeles, Todd Boehly. He is the president of Guggenheim. And of course, Guggenheim bought the Los Angeles Dodgers. And so everybody is now very familiar with Todd. I'm sure you're getting a lot of emails that you didn't used to get, a lot of fan mail. Seated next to Todd is Melinda Witmer. Melinda is the Executive Vice President, Chief Video and Content Officer for Time Warner Cable. She was voted in 2011 as the Woman of the Year for cable television. Melinda, thanks for joining us. I don't really know that I need to introduce this man. He's just known simply as the Great One. He's the greatest hockey player to ever put on a pair of skates. He is one of the greatest athletes to ever play any game that's ever been designed or devised by man, Wayne Gretzky. This man right here has won 8 Grand Slam tournaments. He was number 1 in the world from 1974 to 1978. He won 82% of the time, the great Jimmy Connors. And seated next to Jimmy is Joe Ravitch. Joe is from the Raine group. They advise leagues and teams buying and selling. He's been involved with teams, the NBA, and doing deals all over the world. Joe, welcome. So we will start with Wayne, because
thanks.
Not that everybody isn't in the presence of greatness on this panel, but Wayne.
Isn't it ladies first?
You're the great one.
Okay.
What's it like, and I know this has nothing to do with business, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's it like to walk around as you?
Listen, my house is the same as every other house. I get yelled at. My kids would tell me I'm
That's
nuts.
not fair. Janet's out here somewhere.
No, I don't just mean for my wife. I'm talking about my kids. I'm really lucky. For whatever reason, the good Lord blessed me with, most importantly, a passion for what I did. And since I was a little guy, 4 or 5 years old, my dad always said, for whatever reason the good Lord blessed you, don't blow it. Don't mess it up. And I had a passion for it, a lot like everyone else here. If you love what you do, you go that extra mile, and I was fortunate enough, I truly loved what I did. So I love being me.
And no one has handled being you better. You're perhaps the nicest superstar to have ever walked the planet. So we welcome you here. Todd, there's so much interest in the Dodgers. You purchased the team, you and Guggenheim, for $2.1 billion. About $500 million more than your nearest bidder. What was it that you saw? What did you see that nobody saw? Because throughout the course of this past year, not only have you been proven right with your bid, but this thing is going to make a tremendous amount of money, has a tremendous amount of interest, and you now have a team that is really competitive with a huge payroll of $239 million. What did you see that all of the other bidders and no one else saw?
You know, I think they all saw it, and I think the actual fact that it was $500 million, I think over any other bid, was just because the final round of the process, we didn't have it. So, you know, I think we decided that night, after we were approved by the league, that we were going to put down our best possible number. And, you know, I think that, the previous owner was motivated by the group we put together, and I think he wanted to do right by Los Angeles. And, you know, there couldn't be a better face of a team than Magic Johnson. So, you know, I think we went in that night, you know, with all of our cards on the table and, worked till 4 a.m., and signed it that night. And the thing we saw was that this was an entertainment property. It's not a sports team, and it's our job to treat it as an entertainment property and to give a great experience. You know, and I think when you look at, there was just an article on Real Madrid and what Real Madrid's worth. And here you have Spain with 26% unemployment, and you have Real Madrid having all-time record revenues. And it's a team that generates over $600 million in revenue, and it's worth north of $3.5 billion. So you look at that as a case study. You look at the great Yankees as a case study, and I find it somewhat humorous that people are asking, what are we doing? We're just following paths that have already been created. And I think that ultimately, I think we'll find a very good equilibrium as we build up the farm team, and we have a legion of good longer-term players. And the 235 million and 39 million, there's a lot of baggage in that number. There's teams, players that are still in that aren't even playing. So I think when we look at equilibrium in 2015, I think we'll have a much different proposition, but we'll have a really exciting team. And I think our whole goal is to give a great live experience, which is why we're upgrading the stadium, which is why the focus all along has been to give something that people get really excited about going to. And if you can do that, you'll win.
You mentioned Magic Johnson. How valuable, and then we're going to ask Wayne this, how valuable was it to have Magic Johnson based on, while the team had some success under the McCourt years, the brand had been damaged because of what had gone on?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that there's, especially in light of all the questions around the deal and how it went down, having Irvin there out front, there's not a lot that doesn't bounce right off him. So as someone to kind of nest behind, it's a very comfortable place. So I think he's just been a tremendous asset. I mean, he and I went to Spain to watch the Real Madrid-Barcelona game in October. And we were wandering around looking to do some business in Spain. And we went in and hung out with the president of the various clubs, and he got put on the spot and he had to be interviewed. And he got asked the question, who's your favorite player? And he said, Messi. The next morning I had breakfast with the Madrid president for business, and all he wanted to ask was why was Messi his favorite player? Why wasn't it Ronaldo? And I'm trying to have a discussion around how we can help this company grow. And all he wants to know is, why does Irvin like Messi more than Ronaldo? So, but those are the types of experiences you get to have when you have him as your partner.
Wayne, when you're the face of a franchise and you've been a great player, it always hasn't translated when great players have been able to move into a front office or into ownership. We've seen struggles over the years with a lot of different people. We're seeing it now with Michael Jordan. It's not an easy transition to be the face or the name of a game and then have to go run a franchise. Why is that?
I don't know. I think first and foremost, the greatest players in each particular sport, believe it or not, are always, as talented as they are always the hardest working players. And I think that the frustration from the elite athletes who then get sort of into management and coaching comes from the inability of other players or other athletes to have the same work ethic or the same team unselfishness as they had. And I think that's the hardest part for great athletes when they get into management. And I think that the ones who understand and realize that every athlete is different and the sports in general have changed so much. From when I grew up, from when Jimmy grew up, from when guys who played in the 50s to people who play today, sports has changed so dramatically. Some for the good, some for the better, and some maybe for the worse. But all in all, Todd said here, sports is now in the entertainment business, and you're paid for two reasons as a professional athlete: to entertain and to win. And there's nothing else really as a professional athlete.
We'd say it's for winning and then entertaining.
Okay, yeah, that's true. But I think it's just difficult sometimes because of the thought process of great athletes trying to convince other players, listen, here's what you have to do, and believe me, this is how you get to be the elite, and here's how you get to be the best.
Melinda, you are in many ways, at least on this panel, going to be the source of a lot of information because television is enabling all of these franchises to be sold for these valuations. And, I think that a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, whatever it was, no one even knew what Time Warner Cable was. If you thought that somebody was going to watch television sports, you were going to watch it on ESPN or Fox or CBS or NBC for the weekend games. And we thought that Time Warner Cable, got the cable to our house if you happen to be in their area. Now you guys, just in 2 teams in Los Angeles, if all of the numbers are being reported accurately, have spent $10 billion to televise the Dodgers and the Lakers. How does that work? How can that possibly make ends meet?
Well, I'd like to say that Time Warner Cable is a real trailblazer in this regard, but Comcast Cable, you probably know, has been in the business of owning and running regional sports networks for a long time, and Cablevision with MSG in New York for a long time before that. So I think that what we recognized was that as there's been more and more consolidation in the cable industry, and if you roll the clock back a number of years, a couple of decades, if you were sitting here in Los Angeles, there would have been 24 cable operators. And it really wasn't realistic for a team to do business, to get their games on television through anything other than doing business with a network that could pull all the pieces together and get the distribution to lots of different operators and onto your television set in the home. But over the last 2 decades, there's been a tremendous amount of consolidation. So Time Warner Cable here, there are really only, as cable operators go, 2 cable operators with meaningful presence here, in addition to the telcos and obviously satellite guys. So now we're in a world where there's enough presence that you can work directly with a team to bring their games to consumers in a marketplace without having to go through what I'll call a middleman network. And not unlike everything else in the world, when you have the opportunity to buy direct and to buy from the source, you have the opportunity to have greater control over your destiny, greater control over what ultimately the product looks like, and greater control over the economics. So one of the things we said when we did the deal with the Lakers, and I did have to laugh a lot. You talk about amused. I think every time a reporter wrote about the deal, the number went up. The last number I saw, I have it in my office, someone reported we paid $20 billion. So it's a very exciting category, I guess. But it really enables us, by buying directly, to frankly pay a team more and be able to put more money in a team's pocket, because we don't have to be in the business of making all our money as a middleman. We're in the business of packaging up hundreds of cable channels and lots of programming and high-speed data and phone and all kinds of services to the consumer. And so we don't have to make all our money, and we're not going to be judged entirely on how big a margin we make on any one regional sports network. So it simply allows us to shift the economics.
And by shifting those economics, it'll also shift to the fans, because they're going to have to pay a premium to be able to watch the Dodgers and the Lakers, just like they do in other cities. If you go all the way back to first regional sports networks like Prism in Philadelphia and so on and so forth. And we've seen that, but the people aren't used to that here.
Well, I think
so how do you now pass this on, that if somebody, and I'm guessing at numbers because we don't know what it's going to be, but at some point it's going to be $5, $3, $8, whatever the number is for you all to televise the Dodgers per month. When that gets passed on, how do you respond to the public who's had this for free?
Well, so I think the first thing I would do is there's a great misperception there. We were going to buy the rights to the Lakers and the Dodgers regardless of who we had to get them from, because our customers want to see their games. So whether we were going to get them from Fox, or whether we were going to get them from another middleman, or whether we were going to participate ourselves, we were going to pay to get the games, and our customers pay for them today. So we believe over the long run, we actually are taking cost out of the process for our customers in a more efficient way. We're able to deliver them a product in a more efficient way than when we have to pay a middleman and grow the cost.
And with long-range certainty.
And with long-range certainty, very important. You know, it's part of what I have a whole team of people that do is we buy cable programming in order to package it and deliver it to our consumers. And it's a tough and competitive business, but I would say that all of the money that any consumer is going to see in their cable bill today would be there regardless of whether we participate or somebody else does.
Joe, you helped build the Yes Network, and you've seen what this model is, and now everybody's going to tablets and devices, and television is getting, my estimation, very important for live events, but for a younger generation, they're used to dealing with things on this, and that's not necessarily conducive for a baseball game. Is this sustainable?
Well, the RSN model is clearly sustainable. And I think clearly, whether you're Time Warner Cable, whether you're the satellite guys, whether you're the leagues, you're anticipating and working now towards the future of new devices. Every league has taken a different approach, and it's fairly interesting to watch. I think the NBA has been fairly clever because they've given effectively each of their teams control over their own digital rights to exercise in different ways, so you can get a bit of a laboratory. MLB has obviously centralized it through a separate entity that's monetizing the digital rights of baseball. The NFL is doing it on a collective basis within the league without having a separate entity, but has a very, very smart team, independent team based here in LA doing that. And they will work very closely with their cable and satellite affiliates to make sure that the traditional forms of revenue don't get alienated as they move to new devices. So I think you will very clearly see TV everywhere on sports work while maintaining a lot of the old regime economics around affiliate fees, around retrans, and everything else that the big networks and the big cable companies are using sports for today to generate significant revenue and keep customers.
And how would you recommend going forward for, not only for Time Warner, but for the teams? Because, quite frankly, to view, this is great if you're in the grocery store. Leslie Moonves said that to a panel yesterday, and it was a great line. But people want to watch sports on, big screen TV, particularly big events. So when you have such young people who are so addicted to devices, what do you recommend? How do you get that confluence of events to get together so that people who are paying for the rights for these things are going to have the eyeballs they need?
I don't think it's that complicated. I think the old regime is going to be around for a while because I do think people want to watch it on a big screen, and I think you're going to continue to have sort of very, very simple methods of authentication for people to watch on their devices. They're not going to be satisfied watching a high-end sports event on a small screen. They're going to want to watch it on a big screen at home. And the economics of the deals that are being set up right now by companies like Fox or Melinda's company and others are going to continue to preserve the old system for a very long time. I think there is a confluence of economic circumstances whereby everybody benefits. The leagues, the teams, the broadcasters, and the cable and satellite companies today all benefit. I think the only really interesting question for the future is going to be, this is part of my stump speech, but is when is the day going to come that Google or Apple or one of these tech companies that's sitting on $100 billion of cash is going to step up and say, I'm going to buy the rights to Team X and put them exclusively online and try and disrupt the old system. And so far, none of them have. I think largely because most of these tech companies still don't understand the value of content, particularly sports content. And I think it's very interesting to watch. They all say that they get it, but all they like to do is to share revenue. They never actually have shown a willingness to pay for sports rights. And what it does is it leaves the ESPNs, the Foxes, the CBSs of the world laughing at them because they're still making a ton of money and the tech guys are out there with cats on skateboards.
Isn't it also an issue that Congress will have to take up at some point as well? Because I don't know the exact legal term, but isn't the Super Bowl and the World Series, I don't want to say it's in the public domain or eminent domain, but they have a right to view this, and not everybody has a computer.
Well, again, you're talking, the leagues understand that it's important for their super sort of premium events to be over the air. I think we're a long way from regulation. I think if there was ever going to be a regulatory issue around it, which people continue to murmur about, but I don't think will happen, is the question of whether there's some sort of regulatory mandating of a la carte, as opposed to jamming lots of channels into a big basic package and forcing people who don't want to watch sports to pay $65 or $75 as part of their cable bill to get the Pac-10 channel and the SEC channel and the Big Ten channel and the Dodger channel and the YES Network and everything else that we're creating. I still don't think that's going to happen because you're not hearing the consumers screaming and yelling. And I think there's, again, I think this is going to go on for a very, very long and happy time.
Going to get to you, Jimmy. Melinda, are you worried about a la carte?
Interestingly, I think that a la carte I'm not particularly worried about, but probably for a different reason than you think. I think that the role sports is playing in television today is more important than ever, because it's the one thing that's not replaceable. If you're a Dodger fan and you can't watch the Dodgers, you're not really satisfied when someone says, well, hey, I've got the Angel game, why don't you watch that instead? So unlike entertainment programming, where for the most part a consumer may say, well, that show's not on, I like, I'll watch something else on another network, or I'll go to Netflix, or I'll watch something on demand, or I'll go watch squirrels running around somebody's basement. Sports is unique in that regard, and I think that the valuation around sports rights today is evidencing that. I think the part of the reason that the Googles and the online guys are not necessarily active in this marketplace is because the structure underneath it all, through which the ability to pay for those rights are supported, is the fundamental packaged cable model. And that's not an easy model to replicate, where consumers are paying the kind of money they're paying for programming. And that's what enables cable companies and the networks that put the programming up to pay for the sports rights costs. If ESPN doesn't have distribution to 100 million households at a significant license fee, they simply cannot pay what they pay for rights. And so I think replicating the ability to generate that kind of revenue that allows them to buy the rights they want is not easily replicated. So that's why I think the guys online are not today ponying up those kinds of dollars.
You have something you want to add, Todd?
No, I want to hear what Jimmy has to say.
Jimmy, when you were playing back in your career, when you were dominating the sport, starting in the early 70s and then becoming number one in 74, we had 3 television networks and PBS. And to see you would be a treat, because we would see you at Wimbledon on the weekend. Perhaps if we were up after Johnny Carson, we might see a highlight. But we didn't have 24/7 of anything sports related. It was hard to get an article, and we'd see you at the US Open and wouldn't get the French, wouldn't get the Australian. Now, there's this whole proliferation, all of these channels. Yet it seems to me that your sport has somewhat been left behind, and that the explosion of exposure hasn't helped. Why do you think that is?
I hate to hear you say that. It's funny that I hear Wayne say that it's a passion and it's about entertainment and winning, and it's funny with sports the way it is today in all the sports. It's such big business that it seems to me that sometimes that athletes get lost in the fact that winning is the important thing, and if you win, everything else comes. And so the success of a lot of guys is sometimes based on the size of their bank account at the end of the year, as opposed to the number of tournaments they win. Now, to say that in front of me or Wayne or a lot of guys from the old school, that might not set too well. But in answering your question, that I think tennis has been left behind for the reason that in the day, the U.S. and Australia dominated tennis. And tennis went as the U.S. and Australia went because of the rivalries and because of the greatness that came out of there. The U.S. now is struggling. We're outside of the Williams sisters, we're not producing any champions, and which I think is a big problem. So we're not going into the right places to find them, and to pull the great young players out now and to get them out in front of the television and to show their personalities, which I think is a big part of it. A lot of the guys in tennis have made it clear that tennis is big business. And as Wayne said earlier, it's also entertainment. And that's why tennis, back when I came around, took off. because you had guys who were willing to shoot from the hip and the lip and take full responsibility for it. And so tennis was able to get some press. We were competing against hockey and football and baseball and basketball, and we had the true tennis fan, but we didn't have the real sports fan. So we had to go out and try to get the people that were willing to see the action on the rink and down and dirty on the football field and all the banging underneath the basketball hoops. And we had to get those people who wanted blood to come over to tennis, which was a country club sport, to see us spill ours.
So is that why you behaved the way you behaved?
Well, that wasn't a problem, was it?
It worked.
It worked. I think that, well, sometimes, you ask Wayne what it's like walking around being Wayne. It's sometimes tough walking around being me. But it's okay because...
The passage of time, I'm sure, has helped.
Yes, it has it a bit. But tennis needed a facelift. They had all the great players from the eras before me to come in and to take it to a certain level. My generation came along and wasn't satisfied with that. We needed more. We needed those fans to come in, the real sports fans, to be a part of what we did. Television hooked onto us because they saw exactly what we had to offer. So they started being more prominent in the U.S. Open. So instead of just the finals, they started being around more. Also the big companies and started seeing the value of hooking onto that for advertisement. And then they became more involved in more tennis. And then, to answer your question about the cable started coming on to be a big part of tennis also. And I think in some ways, as much exposure as that gave to the guys in tennis who were really begging for exposure also, that in some ways was detrimental because we were playing on one channel, we were playing from 5 or 6 weeks earlier, and then we're playing live on another station, so it kind of got a little bit confusing in a way. So it happened to work it out to where now all the big tournaments and are certainly on the major channel, which is ESPN now mostly, but a lot of the other tournaments now have become very, very popular, such as Palm Springs and down in Key Biscayne, that have really allowed tennis to carry to another level. Tennis needs a shot now. It needs something that carries it to another level. And the only way that's going to happen, in my opinion, is if we get some good young kids out there who aren't afraid to step out.
When you say step out, you were volatile and you were successful. And that spawned John McEnroe. And he was volatile.
Whoa.
Well, no, I mean, I'm talking
I did not spawn that.
He doesn't want to take that credit.
Not taking credit.
You enabled John McEnroe. How's that?
Better.
You enabled him to exist and to behave in a fashion because he saw it was working for you, and people tuned in for that. And so he did it, and he was successful, and you guys formed a rivalry. Yet, then, I don't know when all this began, but we got into this era of political correctness. And behavior was toned down, and people got so upset with Serena when she screamed at an official who missed a call. And all of a sudden, what you guys had done became the wrong way to go about it, and the interest went down. So do you have to stand up on a chair and do the things that you guys did to get attention for the sport?
I don't think you have to go that far sometimes, but crossing the line is sometimes the most exciting part of it all. But it depends who makes the line. If I'm making the line, that's one thing. If you're making it, it's another. So going out and we were fighting for ink. Any kind of ink we could get back in that time. We were up against Ali Frazier, we were up against Gretzky, we were up against Joe Montana, we were up against Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, and we were fighting for any kind of ink we could get. So stepping over the line sometimes was the only opportunity for us to do that, unintentionally, of course. But Wayne doesn't believe that.
No, I believe it because I in a lot of ways, I played the game of hockey similar to how Jimmy and John played tennis. You know, you get in people's faces, you argue with referees, and you debate things. And listen,
Are you a ventriloquist? Because none of us ever saw that.
Oh, I did a lot.
See, you
but
just didn't get caught. See,
No.
that was the thing.
No, but I was a tennis fan, and I loved it when you guys played. There was some charisma and some emotion out there, and you know, it was more than just watching the ball go back and forth. There was some excitement to it, and you know, it's a fine line, as Jimmy said, to showing that emotion and excitement and watching somebody. You know, in football now, they can't celebrate when you get a touchdown, and you can't argue with referees. I mean, somewhere we've lost a little bit of that human element to all sports that quite frankly, doesn't make it as exciting.
But that's all okay if you win.
Yeah, if you win.
You know, I was told that you can get by with almost anything if you win.
Yeah.
Well, we
You know,
found out
I
what-
just forgot the almost part. So, but it's an interesting feeling that I get from you know, watching the football. I mean, you know, I want, as I wanted tennis, I want that to come into my living room. I want to be down on the field playing or on the rink playing. I want to feel that passion and excitement that the players are supposed to show me. I want to be a big part of that. And if I can't do that, like I don't mind the celebrations, and I don't mind all that, because it's given the people who are sitting there watching saying, now I'd like to do that myself. And you know, and no matter what they do, whether it's their job, whether it's their weekend activity or whatever, they want to feel that and go out and say, I saw Gretzky score a goal, or Montana throw a touchdown pass, or whatever, and have that same feeling of excitement that they see on TV. And to bring that into my living room, I get just as excited about seeing that, because I'm face to face, just like I'd be there. So.
It's because
Well,
it's all
T-
about the fan. I mean, at the end of the day, I look at it from our end of the business, and it really is all about fans.
It is.
And this is what you're talking about, is the entertainment value. I watched a lot of those
Well,
matches.
TV
They were
wants
really
that.
exciting, and that is what matters, because for us, at the end of the day, we're just trying to serve consumers, and the consumer at the end of the day is paying the bill that's ultimately footing it all the way up back through the ecosystem. And you need fans who are passionate about turning on the television and watching a match or watching a game. And if those fans don't turn up, then we can't generate the revenue that flows all the way back up. So I do think it's the entertainment value and the fan that it's all about.
Yet, the general public seems to be antagonized and annoyed sometimes with the excessive celebrations that go on, or displays of emotion. So Todd, you now own a team. I know you have a day job where you've taken a company from billions and billions of dollars to much greater heights, but do you want robots, or do you want guys who are out there that are going to have those displays?
You know, I think it's the line that we're speaking to. We want energy in the stadium. And I don't think you can have energy in the stadium coupled with robots. So I think, you know, and one of the things we're most proud about is how it feels outside of Dodger Stadium now. You know, and I think that the energy inside that stadium, you know, is really magnetic. And it actually transfers, you know, into the fan. And there's nothing more exciting than, you know, when you're on your seat watching something that you have no idea how it's going to play out. The thing that's so thrilling for me is how humbling all of it is. You know, because as much as you think and as much as you plan, you know, everyone was griping about how much pitching we had in April. You know, we've now don't have enough pitching. You know, and you think you plan for these things properly, but there's just no way to predict the outcome, and that's what's so exciting about it.
Can't plan for a guy rushing the mound, can you? Breaking his collarbone.
No, yeah.
But Todd, on a larger scale, most sports has become a TV game. And the in-stadium experience has suffered greatly, because you can sit at home and watch 3D, 4K's coming. You can see every blade of grass at Augusta. You can see every nuance of every sign being given to the pitcher. It's so clear. You're walking from your living room to in front of your set to the refrigerator for a beer. You're getting 9 replays from 14 different angles. The announcers are outstanding, sensational. Why should I go to the stadium anymore and pay all of this money?
You know, I guess I still believe that the live event and being there is what's so special. That doesn't translate yet all the way. You know, I think it's obviously, the TV is great because I think we're going to enter into a world where the TV is what everyone consumes information from, and the devices are how they interact. So we're going to have this loop that continues to drive the fact that they go so well together. So you're on your device, you're watching the game, you learn so much about the game. One of the things that even as the owner of the Dodgers right now, I don't have enough about my farm system. I don't know what's going on in the farm system. I don't know what's going on in San Francisco's farm system. I want to kick their butts in their farm system. And so actually to be able to embrace all of this content that's out there, I think that working with the TV and the device is really where it's all headed. And 12-12-12, that concert at the Garden, one of the things they had was a Twitter feed, at the top of the stage. So not only did you feel the energy of the concert that evening, there was hundreds of millions of people tweeting in, and you could just feel the level of the energy in the room was something special.
The NFL is making a concerted effort this winter to give the people who buy a ticket and go to the stadium something they can't get on television. They're going to open up the locker room so that if you're in your seat at halftime, you're going to be able to hear the coach speak to the team. That will not be available to the audience at home. We'll see how well that goes over with Bill Belichick and some of these guys. And as long as it doesn't portray a competitive advantage or disadvantage, I'm sure that will be successful. What examples can you give us that Major League Baseball and you all are doing to enhance the experience for the guy who's sitting in right center field and who doesn't have as good a view as he would at TV?
I think this is a source of great debate inside of baseball right now. And what I would hope we get to is a place where you can have that interactivity sitting in the stadium in lots of different ways. And I think there's a handful of artificial roadblocks in order to get there. But at the end of the day, we all have the same mission. We all have the same goals. We all want to provide an unbelievable experience, and we all recognize that if the at-home experience is better than the at-stadium experience, we're going to have a problem. So, I think we all agree on the basic fundamentals, which are, kind of the mathematics of the situation. And how we end up getting there will be, something that is highly debated, going forward. But at the end of the day, the good news is we're all very motivated for the same exact end result, which is an unbelievable experience. And the live experience, and the value of the live experience, and premium live experience, in my opinion, is only going up. And in order to figure out how to capture that in lots of different ways and then share it, is really what this whole discussion's about.
Wayne, what's your feeling on this? Because obviously, from a player standpoint, you want the people in the stands. You don't want them staying at home because you thrive off the energy, particularly for a home game. But we see arenas that are not full.
Yeah.
And the game's on television.
I came here in 1988, and the very first game that I played in LA was at the Old Forum. And I came from one of the greatest teams that ever lived in Edmonton, winning 4 championships. And the very first game I looked out there were 6,000 people in the stands at probably $15 a ticket. And I thought, oh my goodness, we got a long way to go. And your thought process is to entertain and to win and to fill the building. But the one thing that hockey has that maybe baseball, and for that matter football, maybe tennis is a little bit similar to hockey, people have the same complaint all the time. I love watching the game on TV, but I can't follow the puck. So we don't have probably the same problem the other sports have, in the sense that for people who go to an ice hockey game for the first time say, oh my gosh, we didn't know it was that amazing. We didn't know it was that fast. We didn't know it was that physical. So our sport, for some reason, hasn't moved from the live venue to the TV quite as well as, say, football. I know myself from watching a football game, it's much easier for me as an average everyday fan to watch it on TV and have it explained to me where everybody's running to, why this guy's moving that way, and et cetera, et cetera. So quite honestly, I'd much rather watch it on TV just for the information. But our sport is in a good position in the sense that we are a fun place to go watch an NHL game. You leave there saying, wow, it was better than I thought. It was exciting. The fans are great. And I think in some ways tennis is like that. If you ever go to the US Open, I don't think TV does it justice to go in there and watch a match and watch tennis tennis and the energy that's in that building, you don't get that same atmosphere on TV that maybe baseball and basketball and football get.
And you talk about hockey not translating well on television. Fox really tried very hard when they had the package. They tried to glow the puck. They had a number of innovations that tried to make this more of a television sport.
Right.
What would you recommend? Why, they've taken breaks so that, they can get the commercials in and so forth. What would you recommend?
Well, I think they've come so far. Listen, we're a little bit of a disadvantage in the sense that our sport, similar to tennis again, that we didn't get the exposure in the United States that basketball, baseball, and football has. So we're a little behind in a sense from the business model, but we've gained a lot of ground worldwide, whether it be in Russia, Europe, Canada, obviously the United States. And I think what they've done is over the last 20, 25 years is try to go to the grassroots. So the more kids who participate in the game and the more kids who play hockey, those kids are saying to their father and their mothers, listen, I want to watch hockey on TV. I want to go to an NHL game. So we're getting more and more kids that are drafted now out of San Diego, Los Angeles, Texas, Florida. There's more and more better athletes at the age of 9, 10, 11 are now saying, I want to play and be part of hockey. So we've made tremendous steps and we've come a long way. And it's only going to grow and get bigger and bigger. I think it's a football player, Popeye Jones, whose son is going to be the first pick in the NHL draft this year as an 18-year-old. And I think he grew up in Denver. So our sport has come a long way. We still have a long way to go to catch other sports, but we're definitely heading in the right direction. It is a great game.
Joe, franchise valuations in the NHL, where are they, and are they going to go on this climb that we've seen elsewhere, or are they stagnant?
I think you're not going to see the same climb in the NHL as you will in other sports. I mean, they've now they've locked in a TV deal, which is a very good and improved TV deal, but there's still a lot of clubs in financial trouble, and there's a lot of NHL clubs for sale. One of the things that the leagues have always done very well is manage scarcity value associated with the number of teams being up for sale, so that when teams do come up for sale, they get sold at the right price. I think that's been a harder task for the NHL because they've had more instability with respect to ownership and financial issues associated with the clubs in certain markets that they moved into. I do think in the other leagues you're going to continue to see a massive appreciation in the value of franchises. I think television, frankly, is a part of it, but I will tell you international is a major part of it. Baseball, for example, my point which I always make to people looking at baseball teams is baseball has done virtually nothing outside the United States, and it's a global sport. And if you look at what the NBA has done, they've created billions of dollars of value for its franchises with an enormous business outside the United States. There's no reason MLB couldn't do the same thing in Latin America and East Asia.
Let me ask you about what's going on in Sacramento with the Kings sale. And
Deal's done.
maybe. Let me ask you.
I'm not going to talk about it, but the team will stay in Sacramento.
Okay, how does it make any sense for someone to buy a team to stay in Sacramento at $550 million when Michael Heisley sold his team in an equivalent market in Memphis for $335 million? So you're now going to pay in excess of $220 million more to stay in Sacramento without a building when the team right now, with the new revenue sharing, is losing $12 million a year. How does this add up when the most you're going to get from a cable television deal is about $25 million? How does that make sense?
Well, first of all, you can never compare market by market like that. The deal at the FedEx Forum in Memphis is a very different set of economics around that building than the economics that the new owner of the Kings will have around a new arena in Sacramento. And the ancillary real estate around it, just like I'm sure there's ancillary real estate around the Dodgers or around the Wrigley Field and around a lot of the other franchises that have traded are relevant. It's not just the media. And again, a lot of the things that I do when I've sold NBA teams is make the point of looking at the value, the inherent value in the fact that when you buy a franchise, you're not just buying those local economics, you own 3% of the NBA. And 3% of the NBA is pretty significant. The NBA, in my view, just like any of these other sports leagues, is a big global entertainment company. And you are a shareholder in that. In fact, the NBA just like MLB, just like the NFL distributes a significant dividend stream every year. You can use that to pay your players. You can use that to put it in your pocket. Different owners do different things. Depends how badly they want to win and how much they want to spend on players and what the relevant collective bargaining agreement is. But the new CBA in basketball is very favorable. And I would argue that I think basketball franchise valuations are going to continue to increase substantially. And the opportunities are to buy these mid-market teams. In many respects, that's the bargain because you're getting a league value for very little.
Would that team have been able to procure anywhere near that price if they weren't having the perception or the ability to leave and be free?
I think that's always a part of it. But again, every one of these team sales is very idiosyncratic. When I sold the Supersonics to Clay Bennett and moved them to Oklahoma City, we would have been able to get that price without effectively the ability to move the team out of Seattle, which we did. And it's still amazing to me today that the people who were involved in trying to buy the Kings for over $500 million had the chance to buy the Sonics for $300 million and didn't. So the world is changing, and I think, as you've seen with the Dodgers and other teams, people are starting to pick up on valuations. I actually think the Memphis deal was a bargain.
Well, Mr. Heisley didn't think so. He lost $30 million a year for a long time. He was pretty happy to get rid of it.
Yep.
Let me ask you, sports transfers of franchises have always depended on somebody's emotional take on this, somebody having to have this for reasons other than economic. A lot of people thought when you guys bought the team, Todd, that it didn't make any sense, and you proved them wrong really very quickly. But in some of these small markets, as you talk about, they've always thought that there was just somebody else who would come along who had to have this. Is that how you think this will continue, and do people base their business on that when they buy it? They know they'll get out of it because somebody else will have that same emotional attachment?
Well, I can tell you very few team transactions I've been involved in have involved emotional attachment. They've all involved a financial calculation associated either with the real estate or the media or some other ancillary.
Was the calculation included when they were knowing when they got out of it that they would get out of it, as opposed to what the business was when they took it over?
I think most people who I've sold teams to, or I've worked with to buy teams, aren't buying teams on the assumption they'll be able to flip it to some greater fool, necessarily. And everybody rationalizes that there may obviously be emotional elements associated with people who always wanted to own sports teams, but there's always an economic calculation that goes into it. I think it's nobody buys a team thinking, aha, I can get it, I can sell it. On the other hand, it was always very interesting because during the depths of the economic crisis, a lot of people came to me saying, well, asset values are down 30% across the board. Aren't sports team values down? And isn't this a good time to buy sports teams? And I said, actually, sports team values are going up. Because again, the leagues did a very good job of managing scarcity, making sure there weren't very many teams up for sale at any one time. And there's a lot of rich people who want to buy sports teams. And as has been proven with the Dodgers and others, there's organizations who've proven effective at monetizing and creating more value for sports teams than existed before.
Jimmy, there have been a lot of scandals in sports in the past year. Most recently, Oscar Pistorius killing the woman in his apartment, Lance Armstrong, Mike Rice abusing guys who are playing for him as the coach at Rutgers, Jerry Sandusky. What do you think that does to sports? And he's talking about valuations, but when the public hears all of this and it comes more rapidly and more repeatedly than we used to ever hear about it, do you feel that it undermines people who want to attend these games and have an interest?
I think we hear more about it now because I've talked and thought about this quite a bit, that when I was growing up and there were only 3 channels, that whether this happened or not, we really didn't hear about it. Now, since there's 24 hours, 7 days a week of television with so many channels, everything is a breaking story, and of course, bad news sells. So when you have something like this that comes out and becomes very prevalent in the public eye, it's certainly a thought. From my standpoint, I have to look at it because sports is my life. I like to look at that as something not in the norm. That it's things do happen and attitudes change, and no matter how drastic, and how terrible it is that you think it's not out there in everybody's mind. So as far as I go, I'm a sports guy. I've always been a sports guy, and nothing is going to take me away from sports. And whether it's my own sport of tennis or watching sports, because I see what it does for kids and what it enables them to do with their lives, whether they make it or not. And it's going through and fighting through all that eventually makes you what you become. Good or bad, right or wrong, you got to go through the good, bad, and ugly of it all to eventually come out and be who you are. And there's nothing better for me than sports in general. And dealing with all that, as terrible as it is a part of life. It is a part of what's going on. And that, in coming through, would only make you stronger. So I feel that with a lot of the things that have happened, I look at it in amazement and wonder how that does happen and how they get by with that. And then on the other hand, I see the pressures of what goes on in as Wayne said at the very beginning, winning. Winning is the only thing, and the pressures that are put on young kids to go out and have to perform to a certain level to come out and win. Things do happen, and it happens to the coaches also. So the pressures are there. It's how you deal with those pressures that what counts.
Wayne, all of these controversies, people wanted to watch Mike Tyson. It was a train wreck. We've got a huge fight this weekend that I hope all of you will watch. Floyd Mayweather against Robert Guerrero, the MGM Grand, pay-per-view on Showtime.
But it's better live.
Call your local pay-per-view operator, right, Melinda?
Is it better live or on TV?
But this controversy sells. Floyd Mayweather's undefeated. He's 43-0. NASCAR, there are a lot of crashes. These guys now get out of the car and want to fight each other. We have fighting in hockey constantly. So with all of this controversy that goes on, is this good for sport or bad for sport? Is it selling sport or taking away?
It makes sports human. First of all, Mike Tyson, I had a 12-year-old son who got a picture taken with him at a fight recently, and he knows Mike Tyson from Hangover. He doesn't even know he was a boxer. So things have changed. Listen.
Does he have both ears, your son?
95% of the athletes are really good people and really nice and very polite, very unselfish. It's the 1 or 2% that make mistakes. They're human. Sometimes we as athletes read the paper and say, wow, what was that guy thinking? Or why did that guy do that? Or, oh my gosh. But it's only a small few. Majority of the kids are really good kids. Majority of them come from hardworking, blue-collar families that want to go out and be the best athlete they can be. And sometimes mistakes are made. And that's the unfortunate part of sports, that sometimes mistakes are made, and unfortunately those are the ones that are the biggest headlines. As a father, I'd be really honest, I'm really proud of the fact they're cleaning up steroids in sports. I have kids who play sports and participate. I'm glad it's being cleaned up. Good for all the sports for cleaning it up.
Melinda, you're in charge of content, and this stuff does sell. Is TV pushing the 3 or 4% or the 5 or 6 bad guys because people will view it? So do you then start promoting that as what it all is?
I think more than anything, just in the rapid information age, and we started part of the conversation talking about devices and the ability to get information pretty much anywhere you are at any point in time and to be incredibly current has created more of an opportunity for people to find out exactly what's happening in sports at all times. As I said before, the thing we care most about is that fans want to tune in. Because if they want to tune in, then they want to buy cable in order to watch it. And it's just that simple. The equation is that simple. So, I had 2 high school athletes I raised, and I was glad that they had good role models. But you do worry, particularly when things like the scandals you talk about, the influences. But I think mostly from a television perspective, we just want people to enjoy watching.
All right, here's what we're going to do. I know that if I had the opportunity, I'd like to ask a question out there, particularly with the people who are sitting up here. So as you get your questions ready, I'm going to ask Todd a question that we have asked here at the Milken Conference every year since I've been doing this, and since it started. Football in Los Angeles. Football in Los Angeles, you now could be a centerpiece of this. You have a piece of property out there that has long been sought by the NFL, along with current site downtown that AEG controls, as well as possibly Hollywood Park. Where is the process and Guggenheim involved with the NFL in bringing football down here? And can we believe reports when we read them that say that you all would prefer to have the AEG site for baseball and have football move out to Chavez Ravine?
You know, Chavez Ravine is a very unique place. So I don't think we would say that we would prefer anything over anything. You know, the Dodgers are so important, and we're not going to do anything that, you know, isn't well thought out, you know, and is disruptive in any way, shape, or form. You know, I think that I'm very humbled and privileged to have the opportunity to try to be part of a solution. And if we get into the position to be able to be part of a solution, you know, we would love to help facilitate, you know, even more exciting activity in Los Angeles. I think when we looked at AEG, you know, we were really excited about the opportunity to, you know, leverage what it was that we already had in order to give great experiences. I think the most exciting part of all of this is, you know, to be able to give a great experience and to give a moment on the field that, you know, people still talk about. You know, so we're really thrilled with the idea that, you know, we might be part of the solution. We're hopeful that, you know, we could be in a role that facilitates this. But I guess we measure this over long periods of time. You know, I think the key here is to make sure that, you know, all of the constituencies are well thought out, are well thought of, and then the plans are well thought out. And I think it's too preliminary to really talk anything more than that. But I think we would love to be part of the solution, and you know, I think we have a very unique site, and you know, I love driving up and seeing how it looks, and you know, the stadium and the environment. I mean, the best thing no one's ever really talked about when we did this whole valuation proposition, the Dodgers haven't had a rain out since 2000. Right? And so, you know, we didn't even know where the tarps were. You know, but those are just fantastic, you know, aspects of what Chavez Ravine is all about. So when you think
Doesn't rain downtown either, probably since 2000.
No, probably not. You know, I think downtown, you know, I think if you look out there and you just work with data, and if you look at the data as to, you know, what's really worked really well for cities, it's hard to argue that, you know, Baltimore, you know, isn't precious. What they've done with the Nationals, you know, isn't fantastic. You go to Pittsburgh, you know, it's fantastic. You know, one of the best parts is being able to travel around the country and check out all the stadiums. You know, and these stadiums, the ones that are downtown, they have a very good feel to them, and they lift everything up. You know, and the reality of it is, you know, 82 times a year, 81 times a year, you know, filling that up, that's just, that creates safety.
And isn't Dodger Stadium the second oldest stadium in the National League and the third oldest in baseball?
Yeah.
Behind Chicago and Fenway?
Yep.
Joe, football in Los Angeles, it seems like it was getting close, and now it seems further away than ever. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's inevitable. I know the NFL cares about it. I think it's harder than people think, both in terms of finding a team. Frankly, I think finding a team is harder than finding a location. Ultimately, somebody's going to decide on one of several good locations. It's tricky when you actually think about finding a team, because it means moving an existing team, because if you're one of the existing owners, you don't want to take the dilution of an expansion franchise. So who are you going to move? A lot of the obvious candidates of the last few years have themselves now are building new stadiums or otherwise entrenched in their cities. So
Oakland and San Diego are not, and St. Louis is free as well.
Actually, St. Louis is not free for another 2 years, technically, and then they can get out of their lease, but yes. And Oakland and San Diego are technically free. That's correct.
Of those, do you think two of them could come?
Well, I think, again, The interesting question, to some extent, if you were familiar with the plans for the downtown stadium, is the cost of football stadiums these days, particularly because the cost of construction is so high. A lot of the economics are dependent on actually having 2 NFL teams. So that also is very tricky for the broader issue. But I think it's inevitable. It's just going to be a matter of time.
Who's got a question for any of these folks up here? Go ahead.
Paraphrase Keynes, better that a man tyrannize over his favorite sports team and his fellow man. To what extent is sports a substitute for war?
I thought it was.
Jim, I will.
I've been around a long time, and I'm not going to answer that because I've got tremendous respect for the people who are fighting for our
That's
country
true.
on a day-to-day basis in Afghanistan, Iraq, Korea, and around the world. And I know the intent of your question, but that's problematic for anybody up here really to answer that based on where our country has been the past 12 or 15 years. Somebody else got a question? I want to thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Question for Melinda mainly. I think a couple months ago, John Skipper mentioned that TV everywhere is 5 to 7 years away from being perfect. Do you feel the same way?
I think that TV Everywhere is coming along quickly now, much faster than it was before. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it's the phrase we use in the industry for using authentication or identity recognition so that you can access your content outside the home that you otherwise buy for inside the home. And it's been a little bit slow. A lot of it was slow, I think, because, as has happened in the past when innovation and technology moved faster than was anticipated, a lot of rights weren't in place. ESPN was particularly aggressive and prescient in pursuing rights aggressively and broadly, so they were better prepared than others. But I do think you're about to see some nice leaps and bounds in giving consumers the opportunity to take the great experience they have in the home and walk out the door and carry it with them.
Todd, Melinda, Wayne, Jimmy, Joe, thanks so much. It's been an honor to have you all. Thank you to Mike Milken.